So, guys, welcome back to the Dog Trap Podcast. Today, we're here with Sal. Sal's from New Jersey.
Yeah, how's it going?
And he is getting ready to open up a facility. But today, we're going to cover sales process. So, I wanted to record this because anyone listening, if you are a dog trainer business, there is no clear shortcuts in dog training. Everything is kind of hard work. And so, there's like a couple of things that I just know when it comes to like dog reactivity, right?
Yeah.
And I know that like the dog specifically requires some sort of reboot, right? And when I mean that sort of reboot, like I need a dog to come back here and build new routines. But also it requires a lot of time for us to understand that dog. And what I mean by that is I like to have them for a day or so or a couple of days. We need to work on their exercise. Like, are they, physically satisfied?
Yeah,
right?
are they fulfilled? Are they getting enough? Yep.
Are they getting enough? Are they eating out of my hand? Are they building a relationship with me? After several days of training, we now have a relationship and I have a very clear understanding of what is it that we want to do, right? Like, or like a mutual respect for each other. Then we can start teaching behaviors. And then once a couple of days after that, or even a week after that, we start asking them to do behaviors with negative reinforcement, right? Like there's the idea of like, hey, I have your food, like cooperate with me, but also you got to do it, right? And we don't need to get into the whole detailed training. I know for a fact that takes consistency, that takes repetition, that takes multiple sessions per day. That also takes
a level of comfortability that the dog has with you.
100%, right? And that takes time, right? So if people want to do a daycare and training program, we know that that's not the solution, right? If people want to do privates and say privates, that may also not be the solution, right? Because the reality is that to me, private sessions and private training is me teaching people how to be dog trainers so that they can train their dogs. So I don't like that, right?
Yeah.
Because if you really want to get it right, we all know that when we started training dogs, there were challenges, right? I mean, the way I can train a dog now, 15 years later, is very different than when I can train a dog back in the day, right? And so we need to take that into accountability, right? So if I'm teaching a new dog owner how to train their dog, we know the sets and the quality. The end goal is going to be very different, right? The end situation of the end product is going to be very different.
Yeah.
And for those reasons, for behavioral cases, I recommend any training that has a end goal or a fixed objective. I'm always going to recommend the board and train program, right? Because the dog is with me. The dog is getting the reps by me. I have a lot of practice. I can do it right. And I know how to troubleshoot in the moment, right?
Yeah.
That being said, when I'm sitting down and I'm talking about reactivity, like I'm not trying to push them on the program, but I am trying to say to them like, hey, like if you really want this fixed, it's not going to be done very quickly in private sessions. Any dog trainer that says, hey, 3 sessions, I will make your reactivity better, and there's 3 private sessions with you, I guarantee you it's going to be a compulsive dog trainer. And what you're doing is you're suppressing behavior. You're not coaching the dog out of it. Right. And so when you start using those kind of examples, people start seeing the value of the programs, right? Like if you want it done fast, just a good chance it might not be fair to the dog, right? And in order to do it right and well and for the dog to be happy and excel in it, it's going to take a while. Like it's going to take time, it's going to take effort, and it's going to take monetary resources for people to be compensated to do it, right? That's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
But then there's a level of guarantee towards the end of it, right? And so at least for us, when we start talking about the designer programs and the length of the programs, for me, it's always come down to structuring programs around what we know works for dogs, right? So say like taking 30 days to train a rehab case, right? A severe reactivity case. We know we can make significant improvements there, especially when that's our full-time job and that's what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And with that comes a level of guarantee. So I will guarantee training. After 30 days with me, your dog will be substantially better, and then I'll outline some objectives, right? And so when you're working with people and you're also, you're actually trying to help them train their dog, you realize that it's one of those things that it's inevitable that they do a board and train program if they're going to do it well, right? And you have objectives, and then it's also inevitable that you guarantee it.
Yeah, I've seen that sometimes with clients that maybe aren't comfortable with board and train. I don't want my dog leaving the house. So, a while ago I tried to substitute it. Like, let's just do a lot of day training.
Right.
And ultimately towards the end of that day training, I'm like, you know what? my hunch was right in the beginning. We need a board and train. So I end up having to kind of do that towards the end anyway. And I do that, because it's my fault. I just do it on my own dime essentially, but it's still like probably should have just started with it.
Yeah, you should start with it. And then what I like to do is I like to just be transparent and with owners and say, okay, I have your dog for a day training program, right? And I'm gonna have your dog for a couple of days. After 3 days, I will be able to tell you whether this is gonna work or not gonna work. And at that time, I also tell people, if at 3 days this doesn't work, if you upgrade to a board and train program where we can actually get this done, I will just credit what you've already paid for the daycare program straight into a board and train program. And that will help them, that helps them get in the door, because it is a lot. I mean, when you think about it, like, you raise this puppy or you raise this dog, he's like part of your family, and then you're going to drop him off with people you barely know. Yeah. So that trust factor, dude, is so important. Like, people cannot train well with you and people cannot work with you if they don't trust you. Yeah, that's a fact. If the client doesn't trust you, that's what it comes, that is where you're going to have different performance in terms of like where you're converting or your ability to help people, right? That's just what it comes down to. One of the things that I think that has always really got to me is that by the time people walk in the door and you're sitting down in a training evaluation, I think what people are really thinking about, what they're thinking about is whether or not who they're going to meet is someone that they will do business with. That's what I think about. Because most people already got on Yelp and Google and everything else, and they did their research and they got through everyone's ads, and they somehow chose you, right? Yeah. They liked your marketing. They like what you stand for. They looked it up. It seems like super legit. And kind of what their next thing is like, well, when I meet this person, does this person match my expectations of who I think they are for me to give them this money to train my dog? That's what it comes down to, right? Yeah. And so sometimes, and it sounds kind of crazy in terms of like sales process, but for me, it's like whenever someone like doesn't want to train with me, I'm like a little personally offended. I'm like, well, why? What do you mean why? I'm willing to help you out with, Yeah. And when you take that mindset, I typically reach out, like, hey, give me some feedback. What is it about the programs that you didn't like, or what is it about me that you felt not comfortable with? I just want to know. It's a lot of feedback, but in an unbiased way. I learned a lot about the industry because of that. Part of the reason why I feel like we've become very successful is because even when I have not been capable of helping a dog and referred the dog out for some reason, I've always asked the owner, well, can I stay in the loop so I can understand so I can find out what the angle was with this dog, right? I want to be part of the journey. I also want to learn, and I want to be able to help other dogs similar to your dog. And a lot of people have been very cooperative with that, and I've worked with behaviorists on that and gotten behavioral notes and understood a bit about how they make decisions to better help me understand that perspective. So being transparent is a big part of, all of that kind of stuff. And so when it comes to like sales, I like to really think about, if I was a client, would I use my services? That's the biggest thing. Like, would I use my services? And if I'm not going to use my services, why do I expect other people to use them? Right? Yep. And then the flip side of that is also like, what are the things that I would like to see in my service that would make me want to use the service, right? And kind of work backwards from there. I mean, that's how we came up with the daily video support, or the report cards, the instructional videos, and then building private sessions into board and train programs, and then follow group classes. And some programs just have group classes because people like the community aspect of being around other dog owners, and they build little relationships, or relationships with their little puppies and their, other people, say, in the puppy program. Yeah. So that works really well.
I feel like the biggest thing is finding a way to do training evaluations that doesn't feel gimmicky. And like we were talking about that last night, where it's like, is it going to be the whole like, they come in, oh, what's Fluffy's deal? This is my dog. Like, look how cool it is. Yeah. And it's like real car salesman-y.
No, at least when I do sales training, I like to get really into the nitty gritty of like why people do anything, right? Like in Nipopo, they say like, what does a dog do anything, right? Like, 'cause it's a better situation. And the reality, like, people aren't that different. They really do things because they want to, they want the thing that they want to buy, or they need the thing that they want to buy, right? And so there's a difference between the thing that they need and the thing that they want. I look at reactivity as something that is a need. Like, you need to fix dog reactivity, right? It's an issue. You need to fix dog aggression. It's an issue. You need to fix all these additional things. It's an issue. And things they want. It's like, well, I want to go hiking with my dog off leash and I want to recall him, right? I want my dog to go to the dog beach, run around in the water, and for them to have a nice recall when they come back, right? I want my family to be impressed by my dog, right? I
Mm-hmm.
want my I want my neighbors to see me as a put together person because my dogs are under control, right?
Mm.
Or I like the aesthetic. I mean, this is specifically for Belgian Malinois people, right? I like the aesthetic of my Belgian Malinois, doing bite work. So I do bite work with it.
I've never seen that before.
Right? No, 100%, right? And so people like they do things like that. And so when you start really understanding why the person in front of you is there, you can better help them, right? And sometimes it's helping them fix an actual problem. Sometimes it's like helping them get what they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of what bite night is, right? The amount of like for personal protection. How
Yep.
many dogs actually need to be doing personal protection? Not a lot, right? But
Yeah.
people enjoy it and people like it, and that's why we have dog sports, right? And people do that, and then there's that. I mean, back to what I was saying, it's the same thing with like adventure dogs, right? Like people
Mm.
want their dogs to be good off leash and do the recall, and I think that's why. They do those programs, right? Some people need them because it's like, I need to exercise my dog off leash so he can get the laps in. That's the only way. I'm not going to walk him 5 hours a day. I can't do that. I need to play off leash with him 20 minutes at the park.
Mm.
And I don't want him to run away, right? So those kind of things, they become like a need, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Like they need to do that. And so a lot of the times it's just going to come down to whether like using your service is going to get them to that goal or not, right? Like does the situation worsen by working with you or not? And so at the back of people's minds, in my perspective, specifically in dog training, um, that's what people are thinking. They're like, are you capable of helping me? Yes or no? And whether
Mm-hmm.
they say it flat out, some people will say it flat out, yes or no, right? But
Yeah.
I think that that's really what it comes down to in terms of that. Some of the things that we outline in terms of like, what are things people want in relation to their pets? It's like they want to be praised and admired because they have a nice dog, right? They have a dog that's well behaved, and so that's something that people want.
Mm-hmm.
What do they? People want to do things with their dog and enjoy the dog's freedom, right? So they want to go hiking, they want to go off leash. Some people that have lake houses, they want to go to the lake house and they want to take their dog and let them run around without the risk of the dog running away, chasing a deer, or getting hit by a car or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
People also want what like they see on social media, right? So they see dogs in the heel, and so I know plenty of clients that have asked for like, I would like my dog to have a nice competitive heel, but that's something that they see. No one needs that. That's something that they do want. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? They also want to feel like they're good dog owners. Like people do training, and talking to a lot of like clients over time, um, training their dog becomes kind of like a staple of what needs to be done. You know what I'm saying? So they look at it as like, I want to train my dog because that's kind of the standard. Like I've always had dogs that I want to train,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that growing up, I've had dogs and we've always gotten training for them. So that becomes
Yeah.
like a absolute want that people do, or that want that people have. On the other side of things, we talked about what people needed, which is they need their dogs not to bite other people and dogs. That's a
Yeah.
need. You can't have a dog that's going to bite other people, and you can't have dogs that are going to bite dogs. They also can't bark when you leave them alone. You know what I'm saying? Especially like in bigger cities or like Chicago is a pretty big place. They need the dog to be quiet, right, when they're left alone in the house,
Mm-hmm.
or else typically it causes them like
Complaints with neighbors and
complaint.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Understand? That's a need. If you just got a dog and you go to your apartment and you put it in a crate and it starts screaming its head off, like tomorrow it's like you got to go to work. Like, what do you do? Do you leave it? Do you leave it out of the crate and does it just destroy your entire house? Or do you or you put it in the crate and it just screams all night, right? Or it screams all day.
Yeah.
Um
Now, for you, when do you decide? So, like, I've had plenty of clients or evaluations that they've come in and they have some things that should be needs. My dog has bitten my fiance. My dog has bitten multiple people, but they're like, it's just puppy problems, though. I just really want this one thing.
right.
And they don't have the full understanding. Like, this is a terrible thing, and your dog is going to get put down
Right.
because of, if you don't do some form of training, even if it's not mine. So, when do you decide, like, maybe I should just cut bait with this person because of their, they just don't have the right mindset about training or their dog?
Right. Believe it or not, I've never fired a client.
Yeah.
I've never fired a client. I think that's a bad habit to get into, and I think people tend to like get into habits of like this client's bad, so I don't want to work with them, right?
I'm saying like in the evaluation process, so like
Yeah.
before they even sign up, or the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that it's like for that, I've also it's the same situation. I've always kind of crafted a plan. Like in those situations, it really comes down to your persuading skills, right? Like,
Hmm.
are you able to truly educate this dog owner and truly persuade them that this is an issue for them to have? You know what I'm saying? Like that this is an actual issue.
Hmm.
That's where a lot of experience comes through. Like I have plenty of horror stories how that turned into went from B and then to C and all the way to Z, right? Like I know plenty of stories like that. And so I have the ability to tell those stories and paint the picture that people can resonate with, or can understand. A
Hmm.
lot of the times people think that, my dog's never going to get to that point, but us as professionals, we've actually seen dogs get to that point, and that's where we can leverage that experience and say, hey, this is the steps, right? And honestly, when you call the steps out, that's kind of what establishes you as a subject matter expert. Meaning that a good example of this is, say someone's struggling with separation anxiety, right? There's different grades and tiers of separation anxiety.
Hmm.
Some of them, it's like, okay, you're going to go outside and leave the dog in the crate. And when you come in, does the dog scream? And they're like, oh, yeah, he screams. Like, how did you know that? Right. I was like, well, when you have a lot of experience. And it's like, okay, so after it screams, does it settle or do you hear them try to rip their way out of the crate?
Hmm.
I was like, oh, no, they try to rip their way in the crate. Cool. Well, you can't have that because
Yeah.
you're going to break teeth. There's all sorts of things that are going to happen, right? The dog can get loose. The dog can maybe get stuck halfway breaking out of the crate. And that's a bigger issue, right?
Yeah.
So when you start saying these things, someone that thought that's not an issue becomes a real problem, right? And
Yeah.
so they start seeing it very differently. The opposite is also true, where people want to leave their dogs outside of the crate, right? Where like you have plenty of experiences where I've had a dog eat a small toy, be in the stomach, be in the intestines for a couple of days, um, destroy a lot of the intestine and have to do intensive surgery, and now something that could have been easily trained around now is like an $8,000 bill, and you're debating whether you need to euthanize your dog because you don't want to pay that or can't pay that, or pay it and then risk the dog not being the same, right, or being out that money,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like when you have situations and stories like that, people are open their eyes, right, because they put themselves in this situation and you're like, oh my god, like I don't want to be there. And so training the dog and doing the things that are necessary becomes like the easy way out, right? We talk about
Hmm.
that all the time. It's like really comes down to like pay points. Nothing is more affordable than when you desperately need it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
Yeah.
just the reality of it. And so sometimes dogs go home and they, you know, I've had this situation happen many times where I say, "Hey, this dog is going to bite again. It's going to be worse, right? Bites are always going to be equal to or greater
Yeah.
than the previous bite." Um, and unfortunately, someone really ended up in the hospital, an owner, because they refused. I said, "Do a board and train program. Not even do a board train. I actually recommended euthanasia for that dog.
Oh
Right?
wow.
I actually
Yeah.
recommend euthanasia. I'm like, if to be honest, it's like a dog that I think should be euthanized because of this X, Y, and Z is concerned to that. And that person ended up being hospitalized, and the dog ultimately ended up being euthanized. Um, you can't help every situation, but you can do your best to persuade them. I hope that
Yeah.
answered your question.
Yeah. No. Totally.
Yeah. So we're talking about what do people need, like the things that people need in relation to dog training. They need to have a dog that's potty trained. They ideally would need a dog to be well behaved at the vet, right?
Hmm.
So there's a lot of these different things that bring people to the dog training world, and it's our job to alleviate those points, right? So a lot of the times you were talking about gimmicky dog training, or like, hey, like here's the script that I was told to tell you, and that's what I'm going to do. A
Yep.
lot of times that drives people away because some of those aren't like even real problems for people, right? Like there's plenty of online courses you can just teach sit her down. In fact, the amount of people that I talk to, it's like, yeah, like I grew up with family pets and we've always trained them, so we know how to
Yep.
teach the basics, but we want to teach reliability, right? Or we want to teach this advanced skill and that. And so I think that that's what we've done that's helped us position ourselves in the Chicago market as unique, is that we're not just trying to take people's money. Like we know when we're like charging fees for professional services that we have to deliver that, right? And so
Hmm.
in order for people to feel safe about it, like we guarantee the training, right? Like
Hmm.
that's just a must. Like if you're going to take people's money for training, you should guarantee it that you're going to be accomplishing something, right? And you should
Yep.
have objectives that you will reach, because that's like a must. That's like a promise. That's what you're being paid for. People need to know what they are paying for, like what skills and what they can expect in the training, right? And this might piss a lot of people off, but for me, when people say, I don't guarantee it because I don't know what the owners are going to follow through.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the owners are going to follow through, or the owners are just going to mess it up or whatever. Like, to me, those are just kind of excuses, right? Because in reality, on the checkout sessions or like the first follow-up sessions, at least when the dog leaves, I can guarantee that on command the dog can do this.
Yeah.
Can the dog and me coach, excuse me, and me coach the owners and say, hey, if you tell this to their dog and you follow these steps, your dog's gonna do X, Y, and Z, and the dog's gonna do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can guarantee that, and I can guarantee that I can get to a dog to that point with that owner.
And it's also our job to tell or demonstrate to the owner why that's so necessary and why that's going to help everything so
100%.
much.
And that guarantee starts helping you shape a lot of the things that a lot of your processes, right? So my evaluations literally come from like having to guarantee things, which is like, no, I really want to know the expectation. No, I really want to know what you're struggling with, right? And a lot of times and we'll get into kind of the evaluation process where I just need people to tell me their dog's life story. Like, just tell me where you got the dog and what we're doing, right? And then that kind of goes into like, them building trust in what we're doing, then moving on to like signing up with us, and then us talking about clear objectives all the way to the checkout process, right? But yeah, I mean, guaranteeing training kind of makes you like, puts you in the hot seat, like I must deliver in the things that I said, right? And also that's good because it provides standards to people, like they know they're going to be getting something, not just like collecting money. And I would say, I don't know how it is now, because I haven't been like outside of the sport community. I haven't spent a lot of time in like general dog training population. Like, I haven't gone to local dog training facilities and see what they do. But for the most part, I've seen it's kind of gimmicky dog training. Like, hey, pay for a session here, pay for a private there. And it's just like the structure of the program is not even built for the dog to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you can just tell that right from the start. The price to value discrepancy. And basically what that is people like naturally think that you're charging more than what the program's worth, right? And the reality is that you should really build your programs around ways that you are delivering the value to the clients and the dogs blatantly see the value, right? And then adjust from that. A lot of the times people think that you're just trying to get away with as much money as you can, right? But the reality is like, we don't really negotiate. Occasionally we'll like run sales and stuff like that, but we don't really negotiate training because it's like, our skill is not worth less on a Friday than it is on a Monday. You know what I'm saying? Or is and when people do Black Friday sales and board and train programs or like that kind of stuff, to me it's just like, so you're just worth less
on Black Friday.
On Black Friday, you know what I'm saying? You still have to do the work. Like, that's crazy to me. Yeah. That really is crazy to me, right? And so I'm a big fan of structuring programs to like drive value, right? In a good way. It's like, I remember doing this, and we do this for Chicago Canine, which is like someone does a board and train program with us. They have 3 months of follow-up sessions where they can drop in for any of the classes, learn handling, do whatever, and then they have a couple privates built into the program, video updates and everything like that. So by the time where people are signing up for a program, they're like I'm getting a lot, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes it is too much. We've done it where it's just like, I remember we were doing boarding trains, like the 2-week boarding trains a while back. This is several years ago. We did evaluation. We would do the 2-week training programs, videos every day. Twice a week, they would get a video of a breakdown of all the dogs training till that point, and then the instructional program, one private every week. So they would then come and see the dog every week, right? Like private, get everybody, do a checkout session. We would do a follow-up in-home session afterwards. And then on top of that, what we would do is we would add a free group class at the end of it. So basically, when they say, how long is it going to take me to participate in the program, graduate? Like, after those 2 weeks, what do I do now? It's like, no, this is like an 8-week program, 9-week program, 12-week programs. I think to start to finish, it would take like 12 weeks. Like, you did your boarding training, you did your follow-ups, and you did group class. By the time you're done here, you would be like, please, I'm done, right?
Yeah.
But we were able to do that because we had a team and we had a facility and everything like that, right? But we structured our programs so that they are extremely beneficial to the client, right? And I think that was looking back, that was one of the key dominating factors in us succeeding in this, was that we didn't do market research and say, you know what? I think so and so is doing this, so we're going to do that, right? So and so is doing 3 weeks and charging this. We should do that, right? No, we looked at the dogs and we looked at our clients and we looked at the way we want to train, and we said, you know what? This doesn't make sense. If someone actually wants to get to that goal, this is
Hmm.
what it's going to take, and this is the price. And a lot of times people are like, that's a no-brainer price. I think it was like $1,200 for 2 weeks back then. It was
Hmm.
like 2013, 2011 to, during
Yeah.
those times. And people were for it. I mean, they just were like board and trains, board and trains. People would do board and train programs just so they can get into boarding. I remember that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we had different reservation slots, right? So if someone wanted to board during a holiday weekend or whatever for 3 days, they're like, I'd just rather do another 2 week board and train because of the value is great and all the things that we do, and we love you guys. And so um, we kind of always made those things like no brainer things. We don't, yeah, like we don't really compete on prices. We structured pricing around the salaries we want to pay our trainers. That's it.
Yeah.
And then be able to afford the things and turn over a profit. That's what we decided. Everybody's situation is differently, and I think that's the problem with um, doing market research, is because I go look at Sal's business. Sal's goes to look at Andy's business, and Andy's looking at Justin's business, and everybody goes around, and we all kind of create a general average, right? Which is like,
Yeah.
I think we're all going to charge this, right? But everyone's situation is different, right? Sometimes you may have Sal who's like independently wealthy and just does this as a hobby and just charges super low prices, right? Because he just wants to do it for a community or whatever and pass time.
Hmm.
And you have zero overhead. And then you have people that are like have a massive overhead and they're trying to charge your prices because that's what you're charging. Everyone's situation is different,
Yeah.
right? And so you have to price based on you and then drive value based on what your specific what you want your programs to have, right? And when you find and the way you would like to build value in your programs, right? A lot of the time, if you were like um, a positive only person, if someone did like a 16-week board and train programs at a premium price
Yeah.
and is like positive only, you will have a client that's like, hey, I literally want my dog to be trained positive only. And if you can deliver on it, that's another thing. If you can't deliver it, that's on you. But if that's what it takes and someone's willing to pay you $20,000, then like, hey, more power to you. But that's
Yeah.
creating a product, right? That's creating a product around something you believe, something you want to do. And if there's a market for people to pay it, people will pay it, right? And so that's what I always say about dog training, is trying to innovate and trying to create different services. Because if you listen to your audience, you look at your situation, you look at where you believe you can dogs get, that's what you should use to as a compass to, basically build the services for your company, right? Build the services for you. I mean, in my time, I remember that I went to the dog daycare boarding expo in California a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
and there was a place called they did a seminar or did a presentation. It was Doglando. It's in Orlando, Florida. It was called Doglando.
Nice.
And so she had like 25 spots. She's like, I got 5 acres, 25 spots. No one is out there for the dogs. Like, it's just me and the dogs just roam free on 5 acres, right? And it's just like, that's them. So how do you deal with supervision? And people just have their questions. But the reality is her process is everything. She has like a kennel and she puts the dogs in that kennel.
Hmm.
And the dog just sits in that kennel next to the other dogs in the playgroup for days. And so when the dog finally shows no interest in other dogs on the other side of the gate, it's finally allowed to come out. And so that's how they vet their process, right? And it works out really well for them. And the dog learns to like just be amicable with dogs. Obviously, no aggression, no whatsoever. They don't even
Yeah.
want dogs being excited coming into playgroup, right? And they're willing to say, I'm going to build this like a little crazy of a program, right? Because it's strenuous, right? It's
Yeah.
very detailed. But that's the client wants that for their dogs, and they're like, I want my dog to do that and go there and be on 5 acres with 25 other dogs, and I'm willing to pay the premium for the introduction process, which is bring my dog, put it in a kennel, and it's like, well, why is it in the kennel? Why can't it do things during the day? Because we don't want it to be excited. We don't want it to be excited. We want it to be chill, have some learned helplessness, eventually be like, come into playgroup and you're relaxed, right? But that's using dog training. But you see how they build their own pricing, they build their own way of thinking. That's what I encourage everyone in dog training to do, right? Like,
Mhm.
find their differentiating factor. And a lot of the times when you do that, you're going to find yourself moving really, really far away from gimmicky dog training, Do you see what I'm saying? Or like a
Yeah.
standard practice. Everybody, everybody's different. A lot of the times I feel like if you listen to your clients, you're never going to go wrong. You see what I'm saying? Because, and we're talking about your ads, right? Something I learned about running ads is that if you don't have good engagement on your ads within the first 3 days, just cut the ad.
Yeah, you were telling me that before.
Just cut the ad. I got this from a book that Alex Hormozy wrote. And it's a great ads book, right? In terms of like knowing the performance and stuff like that. Because a lot of times we're just getting to know the audience, right? Especially when you're new into that. But it's the same thing with services. So like if you are launching a facility and you say, this is a random service I came up with. It could be anything. It could be a weird new way of doing boarding trains or whatever it is.
Crazy group class idea.
Right. Crazy group class idea. And you do it. And out of 100 people, 5 people do it. Don't do
waste
it again.
the time.
Don't waste the time. It's not an interesting concept. People don't want to do it, right? And if it's super popular, fine, do more of it and learn and grow from it, right? But a lot of the times people get stuck on that idea. They commit and they marry themselves to their idea of a service and they don't pivot. And then they spend 6 months there, 9 months there, a year there, and it becomes an issue. Like it took me years, dude. I mean, I started messing with like social media ads and like, I think when they first came out, it was like 2013 or something like that. No, not even. Like 2015, I think social media ads came out, which was surprising to me because, it drives billions for Meta at this point.
Yeah.
But I remember messing with those things that come out, and I was one of the first ones there learning it and trying to explore it. And it took me years to then be finally able to say, you know what? Maybe people just don't like the ad. Maybe people don't like the services being advertised, and that's okay. But instead of trying desperately make something work, just listen to your audience, right? Listen to the feedback of clients. Today, I spend most of my day doing one-on-one with apprentices and managers in terms of like, give me some feedback on what we could be doing better, right? As a company and improving and doing that. And you build commonalities and you give, if you really want to improve the service, if you really want to improve the work environment, you're just going to listen and you're going to apply that, right? And ultimately that's what's going to help you do everything else. So you have to be willing to like listen to what people tell you about the services and things that you develop. And a lot of this part of like my coaching for people, because this is usually like a 3-day coaching, like start to finish, but we're just kind of zooming through it, is we talk about like, how do people think about services? And honestly, if you did a little bit of self-reflection on yourself, you would find yourself answering these questions pretty easily, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are the things that you buy because you want? What are the things that you do because you need? And then sometimes like people are broke or don't have the cash for it, but then the more dire the situation becomes, they're like, oh, you know what? It's very affordable.
Yeah.
That happened to me with my canine grass, because I have canine grass in my house in the backyard, in my house in the backyard. And I remember they came out and quoted me. It was like $9,000 or some shit like that for canine grass in my backyard. And I was like, what the fuck? I was kind of like insulted, and I left. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And since that time, they've done like so much canine grass here in the facility, all over the place. They're gonna do some next door. I recommend them all of the time. Personal protection clients love canine grass. You give them the number all the time because they can, they go out in the Ford and they're like, please put turf here. So anyway, I had a German Shepherd at the time, and what ended up happening was I was like, no, it's too much. It's not worth it. And then winter happened, and then the ground froze, and then snow melted, and then so it created a frozen ice and like soggy water and mud, and then dogs go to the bathroom, so it's like poopy mud, right?
Yeah.
And my dogs would get out there and go run around and wrestle for a little bit, and I'm like, oh my god! And then they would come back in the house.
And just track mud
and
everywhere.
Then like track mud everywhere, dude. And I was so grossed out that April, or it's that March or something like that. I was just like, this is worth $9,000. It's 1,000% worth $9,000. And at the time, it's funny because 6 months before that, not even 6 months, maybe like 4 months before that, I was like, man, it's too much money. I can't afford it. I can't afford it. And then very quickly, I was like, no, it's very affordable, right? Because the angst of having to deal with mud for me was like a big no-no. Like I grew up with clean little pit bulls with a little patio outside, and they were like, oh, it's raining outside, put me inside. Like, oh, it's mud. There were little babies like that. And so then to have like big hairy dogs that were like that,
It motivated you to go
No,
and spend the
100%.
extra
Yeah, it's
amount.
just
Yeah.
spend the extra money. And a lot of times people make decisions that way, right? Like no one thinks a $3,000 boarding train or $4,000 boarding train is worth the value until you go to the forest preserve, you take their dog off leash and it runs away and you can't find it and you spend like 2 hours running around and every single time you try to catch that dog, guess what it does?
Runs way faster.
Yeah, it like runs or
Thinks it's
what's
playing.
or it's more infuriating. The most infuriating part for this, dude, is worse than that. Is when
They like play bow and like, yo, you're chasing me. We're
well,
having
not
a
even
good
that. I
time.
wish that's what they would do, right? I wish some dogs would do that because that would make sense. But what some of these dogs have done to me, my personal dogs, is that they would move slightly faster than I can catch them.
Oh,
So they
yeah.
would not take off running, but they would like move at a
Yep.
pace where they know I can't catch them. So
You're
if I
almost there. You almost
so
got it.
if I went on an actual sprint, they would just be like, you can't catch me anyway.
Gotta be quicker than that.
Right. So I've seen plenty of people struggle with that.
Oh,
But
yeah.
in those moments of rage, because your dog's like won't come back to you, you're kind of thinking like you're literally thinking like I should just pay those $4,000 to Sal. Like I should just pay Sal $4,000 for some off leash training, and then people pick up the phone, call back, and they do it. Right? I never force anyone on programs. Right? I always just say, "Cool, you're leaving. I'm sending you a follow up. Let me know. I will follow up with you in case you have any questions. Follow up with me later. Like I'm not. If you're not committed to doing it, don't commit. Right? But people really like that honesty and they like the transparency and they build that camaraderie with you. Like you know what? At the end of the day, this guy really went with what I wanted and not something that I was forced into, right? Anytime someone is forced into doing something they don't want to be doing, they regret it
It's resentment.
or they do a bad job. They always do it, dude. And I've had people, I remember doing group class last summer, and everybody was in it. Like I always have like the very like, like, oh, I'm ready to train. And the more we train together, the more they're like, I think I want to compete with my dog, right? Because we get really into it and we talk about science and but then I saw one guy that always show up late and he was mad. And he would sit on his phone, didn't want to do the work. And I was just like, and I remember doing in-homes with that person, right? Go in there and I'm like, no, I will go above and beyond to really help you and kind of get to the point. But at the end of the time, kind of a little bit of my coaching side and my management side came out for people. And I just said, you know what? Like, you just don't want to be doing this. It's cool. You just don't want. I know you don't want to be training with the dog, right?
Yeah.
And Fabian, you're right. I don't really want to be doing it. Can I get a refund? And at that time, I didn't really agree with it. And I said, you know what? I'm happy to give you a refund or a credit for. I think it was a partial credit for services. For to just kind of keep using the facility, do your thing, right? But I also did we did a partial refund for credits that they didn't use. So classes they didn't take, things that are not going to do or they're not going to use the program. But I've learned that with time. I didn't sign that person up, but I believe another trainer did.
Mm-hmm.
But for that reason, no one that is not really invested in doing something with me, do I ever really sign up? And I know that's like contradictory to business, but I think good business breeds better business and then breeds more positive outcomes and more success, right? I think ultimately that's what happens when you do a good job.
And also like the damage that one unhappy person can do because maybe they got leveraged into doing the training by like a spouse or a situation.
Yeah.
And then they're maybe upset that, it just didn't work out for them anyway because they got kicked out of their apartment because their dog barked another 3 days and now they're still doing the training or whatever it is. It could be so much worse for business and reputation than if you just were like, you know what, you're really not into this anyway.
Right. No, 100%. And I think that's one of the reasons I just don't touch that. So either commit to me and we're in it and we're going to do this, right? It's all the same thing with personal protection dogs. I was just on the phone earlier today with one of our partners for placing personal protection dogs. And we had a conversation about so a couple of dogs that we need to source and blah blah blah. You kind of overheard it. And the biggest thing that I got to that, and I've kind of realized in my career, is that when you're buying a personal protection dog, I think you're getting the dog for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The client's getting the dog, but they're also choosing who they're going to be working with and who's going to be doing the maintenance, right? And what I feel is like a lot of these personal protection companies are like, here's the dog, see you later, I'm out, and then we get the complaints. People in Chicagoland area, now that we have Chicago Canine, people will reach out. It's like, that drop off was awful. I didn't want to work. I don't want to work with them. We're going to fly those guys back in to work with them, but we'd rather work with you guys. We like you guys. And honestly, one of my one of my personal clients, for that we placed a dog with him, he told me, he's a CEO of a big company,
Yeah.
publicly traded company, and he basically said, he said, "You're always gonna be my dog guy, always, because you got me the dog that I wanted." But in reality, it's the people you're gonna be working with. It's always about trust, 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 trust. Do I trust this person? Is this person gonna take care of me, take care of my dogs, take care of that? Like, like do that kind of stuff. And personal protection dogs, yeah, people think they're getting the dog and we're finding them a nice dog, but really, it's the quality of the people that you're working with that matters the most to most people, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Especially with something like a personal protection dog, like it gets pretty invasive, whether you're
right.
doing like scenario stuff like at their house, or they have to open up about maybe some things
They give
that,
you the car, they give you
yeah,
the car or the house keys, and they're like, hey, can you send someone to pick up my dogs? Then you're passing on that trust to other people. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it goes well beyond the dogs, right?
oh yeah,
And so when we start breaking down the evaluation process, that's a big determining factor. When they're there to talk to you and they're in the evaluation process, they're just gauging, are you going to get me to the finish line of where I need to go? Or are they going to, or they have reservations? They're like, you know what? It looked good. The marketing looked great. Everything was awesome. I liked the thing. But then I went and I was like, they said this one thing that I didn't like, and I'm kind of backpedaling, right?
hmm,
Which is fine. They don't need to work with everyone. But as a trainer, they have to understand that that's what's going on, right? We're never confused. We are never confused about conversion rates, and I
hmm,
talk about that, right? Um, um, and I'll say this, and I'll kind of go back to the main story, right? Because I think it's important. So typically for me, like whenever there's an issue of conversion rates or um, leads coming in and then how many actually come in and show up, right? Whenever we have that issue, or have had that issue, because we don't, everyone here knows the culture and we already
yeah,
know what it is. It's always the people. It is never the process. It is never the process. The process has been the same for the last 10 years. It's never the process, always people. Because the thing is that people forget. Like, if you, especially when you work with a larger company, people forget because they every day shows up, and dogs are happy, people are happy, and the life goes on and things are just perfect. But they change their habits slightly in the follow-up process, right? So you may
hmm,
be, when we're like really on top of our shit, people are like, hey, someone texts or calls and we're on it right away within the hour or less than that time, or maybe simultaneously, right? But then things get comfortable, people get busy, everything's fine, and you realize, oh, it's been now the follow up rate is like 24 hours, right? Like that's the timeline when people are between an evaluation coming in and someone following up. And I'm like, 24 hours, dude. Like, they went on Google and they're like, reach out to that company, that company, that company, that company. In fact, I'm gonna text my brother too. Hey, do you know anybody that trains dogs? Blah 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 blah.
hmm,
By the time you're calling them, you're already the last person altogether, right? So you have to really assess your process. Are your processes that welcoming to bringing people into the facility and bringing into your business or coming to you as a trainer? Or are they keeping people away? During COVID, there was a month that we got 276 evaluations in 1 month, submissions. It was like, I think it was more than that, but I'm going to say 276
holy
training
shit,
evaluations in 1 month. It was crazy, and we were so backlogged. Everyone was, right, but we were already familiar with managing wait list. Um, but what we did is we did the exact opposite process, which was like, we know we can't service all of them, so we need to
mm,
be with the most committed people,
mm,
right? And so what are we going to do? Well, we're going to ask them to fill out a longer form, right? Just filling out a longer form instantly weeds out people that are just like clickbait buttons and they're not serious about training their dog or that kind of stuff, right?
yeah,
And so we decided to craft a little bit of a lengthier process in order to be selective about who works with, right? We also started treating our training evaluation form as a kind of like a product drop, meaning that like the evaluation form is only open from the 1st to the 10th of every month.
mm,
So that is the only time you can jump in and get a training evaluation, right? And so people would wait. They're like, when are they opening that form? And then they open the form and then they submit their thing and then we're on top of them. And then we will cap out, I think we will max it out as 35 evaluations a week. Like, that's the maximum we would see. Because any more than that, you couldn't even accommodate. Even if we did 1,000 evaluations a week, it's like we can only train like 18 dogs at a time, right?
yeah,
So it's like, between an entire fully staffed, you can't do it. So our processes kind of dictate that. And so as entrepreneurs, business owners, dog trainers listening to this, your process matters a lot. You know what I'm saying? In terms of doing all this.
mm,
Um, just got a text message saying, Cindy, your evening dress is ready.
Your dress is ready,
My
Fabian.
dress is ready at 10 a.m.
You're
I
ready
have
to go
no
to the
idea
ball.
who they're talking to. But anyway, so let's talk about like the things that like motivate people, right? Like when people are signing up for service, a lot of the times people think about like what they're going to receive, how long is it going to take to happen, right? So how long is it going to take to happen? How will I know that it's going to happen? And then what's expected of me, right? And so a lot of that stuff comes down to like, I'm willing to pay if I don't have to do it. If Sal can take my dog, and I trust Sal that he's going to train my dog and he's going to deliver a dog that's going to listen to me, and it's going to be very easy for me to transition into that role, that has a lot of value. Now, if you're telling me that you're going to train my dog for 3 weeks, and now I'm going to have to attend 6 months of classes for me to really maximize the use of my training, I'm like, fuck that. What am I paying the $3,000 for? Are you training my dog, or are you paying you to have my dog for 3 weeks, and you're going to teach me to train my dog for another 6 months? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's a big deterrent for people. What am I going to get? And I think outlining objectives, we have program objectives for every one of our programs. And we took a little bit from PSA a couple years ago. And into our programs, we added little scenarios that the dog must pass towards the end of their board and train.
Yeah.
In depending on their program, like day 10 or day 21, depending on where they're at. And so one of them is like recalling a dog off leash through several distractions into a heel, right? And that's like their day 21 goal. And so day 5, it's like, can they use pressure to like send the dog to a place and
Courage test down the field to a bowl of food.
Yeah, exactly. Courage test down the field. So like objectives are really important, right? And so what's nice is when you have a form like that, you can structure a program. You can structure your own program, right? You can structure stuff for yourself. Like, this is the way I'm gonna train my dogs. But also when I talk to my client, I sit down and say, this is what you will be getting. Right. And that's a big important part of it. This is what you will be getting. These are the objectives. And I want to make sure your dog can get an objective. So that's very clear to you. That's very clear to the trainer. And then you can look at the dog in the assessment and say, hey, little buddy, is this something that you can do? Right. Because some dogs can do certain things and some dogs can't. Whatever you do, never, ever, ever, ever get a dog into a program where it doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Never. And I will say that to all dog trainers, and also for dog owners, and if anybody's listening to this, never sign up a dog for something that they don't need, because it just never works out. You know what I'm saying? Like the dog, and also like what's going to suck is that people are going to try to do that with a dog. They're going to try to achieve it. And there might not be fair, right? So I just personally don't even, if you have a little like chow chow, not even chow, because chow chows can be driven, but if I have what kind of breed is not driven?
Bloodhound.
I have a bloodhound, right? And I mean, some bloodhounds can fly down the field into a heel, like
I'm trying to think.
If I have a 13-year-old dog,
fat little chihuahua, it looks like it's about to explode.
Yeah, and say, hey, in 3 weeks, no, don't promise that. Say, I've actually do the opposite and say, you know what, I need 3 weeks to do like a fitness program with your dog. I need 3 weeks of your fitness program. So I need 3 weeks for a fitness program, and then he can go home for a little bit, and then he can come back and we can do an actual morning train. And I've had people actually, I'm going to write that down because that's a pretty badass service.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
People are willing to pay for fitness programs for their dogs to lose weight. That is so funny. Guys, if you're listening to this, steal that shit.
I actually have a friend who has an entire business all around canine fitness.
Right.
And it's awesome. And she does treadmill sessions to...
Who is it?
It's House Byron. It's a company in New Jersey. Her name is Lisa. And she does an amazing, amazing stuff.
Yeah. Dude, no, 100%.
I partner with her a bunch every chance I get because she has some really good stuff going on.
That program is probably better than any program that I would put together. I would just be like, you're getting less food, water, and you're playing fetch if you want to play fetch. And then you're running at the treadmill. You're going to do that every day for a while. But no, I mean, that's, people structure that. So I think that there's a lot of creativity that can happen. How long will it take? It's going to be something that I think it's really important for people to understand. Like, how long will it take? And as you get better as a trainer, you can sort of have some predetermined thresholds. Like a big thing for me is, I would say like within 3 days, I know how reactive your dog is, and I know whether it's going to take me 2 weeks or like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
After a boarding train, and then do a follow up, because I've had dogs that I don't know if they're more predisposed to aggression, or they're honestly they're more obsessive and they probably have less intelligence than some dogs,
Yeah.
and they're more intense. They're probably all drive and no brains. And we've trained those dogs repetitively on the exact same socialization aspect, their habits and reactivity for 9 months. And after 9 months, I've seen it get better, right? So I always tell people it's going to be 3 days, 2.5 weeks, or 9 months. Those are the thresholds of progress that I've seen with severe reactivity. It's either
Yeah.
going to, after 3 days, the dog's like, oh, this is so much better. I'm not frustrated. I can do things. Or it's like, we really worked our asses off. And towards the end of the second, or after heading into the last part of the third week, the dog's significantly better. Now we're going to spend the next couple of weeks really making improvements, generalizing, doing all these different things, right? And after that, I've just seen it go months and months and months. And I have just a few clients. I have a few clients that I hopefully one day will bring onto the podcast that literally are like, they're like, you guys are the most consistent people because you did exactly what I told you to for an obnoxious amount of time.
To get to achieve their goals.
And you achieved it. Dude,
Yeah.
I have a Rottweiler that was like severely aggressive for like 10 years of his life. 10 years. Fiance got married. Fiance had 2 German Shepherds that kind of got into it with the for the Roddy. And then like, we want to live together and we want to incorporate them and I don't want to euthanize them. And I said, all right, I need you to like buckle down and you're going to do a 12-day integration program with me and the dogs. I'm going to muzzle train your dog. You're going to learn to use an e-collar and you're going to have a leash and a prong and you're going to learn to live life like this in a certain way, right? And when this happens, you're going to do this. And when that happens, you're going to do this, right? And you're just going to rep it until it goes away. And if I were to sit down and did calculus of like behavioral science, be like, if dogs do this and it would be like, okay, then this is going to be the desired outcome. And I kid you not, like they were like, got it, understood, I'm going to do that. And then they're got to be so happy right now. One of my apprentices is watching their dogs, and you see, I think Mariah is watching the dogs right now. And she posts this on her Instagram all the time. Her and the dogs are just like all 3 of them on their walk, my babies. And you see like Nava, the old Rottweiler, just sitting there. And I was like, if people only knew how like this dog was like before Lisa, the owner, committed to really getting this done, it's important. But anyway, what's expected of them? Objectives. Really, really, really important. And then how do I know it's going to happen? Like, what is it like thresholds? And that's where we incorporate videos and stuff like that. Kind of our next generation for us at Found Training is going to be like emphasizing this fact of how do I know this is going to happen, right? And so we're building in a couple of things. For example, like when people sign up for our board and train program, they immediately get access to our online program for their board and train. So it's gonna be about like, hey, do this, do that. This is how to prepare your dog for a board and train. So we start teaching them how to train their dogs before they drop them off for training. And then it just makes the process so much smoother. So there's a lot of that, right? And so all of that is just equals value. Like you're going to take the dog from me and you're going to take the dog from me and you're going to train it for me. These are the things that you're guaranteeing my dog will do. This is how long it will take. And you're going to keep me informed the entire time. And that is X amount of money. Then they're thinking like, oh, this sounds great. Especially if I trust that person. It's a no-brainer. Just do the program, right? And that's where a lot of that, I think that's where we get our success is like the combination of that. And you'll have to formulate your own combination of that as anybody else that listening to this. And I apply that to everything else, dude. Like I'll do the same thing with like Chicago Canine. Like Scott and I are doing the same thing with that in terms of like our boarding trains, how we're sourcing by like dogs, how we're doing by night, boarding training facility, Pup Start. Like Pup Start is like a little badass program. We really like that. And as we go into board and trains for people, we're gonna do the exact same thing because it works and it's very clear for people. All right, so we're pretty deep in the year. It's like, how do you increase the perceived likelihood of achievement, right? And we talked about information of examples of our work, right? Like that's kind of what it comes down to. It's like telling people how we've solved other similar problems, right? It goes back to like establishing yourself as a subject matter expert. If a lot of the times for me, when it comes to reactivity, I'm like, okay, we're going to do a reactivity test and see how aggressive your dog actually is, right? So I'm going to bring one of my sweet dogs behind my fence and I'm going to have one of my handlers handle it and give it food. And so it just keeps it in the, in sit position. And we're just going to let your dog come up to the fence right? Like your aggressive dog come up to the fence. My dog's safely at the other side of the fence, right?
Mm.
And we're just gonna see how bad it is, right? So typically the dogs, I said the dog's gonna do three things. It's gonna bark, 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 and I'm gonna say, "Hey, Fido, get over here." And then the dog looks at me, and I'm gonna say, "Yay, good boy!" and give it food, and he's gonna be like, "Cool, leave the dog alone, come with food," right?
Mm.
The other dog is going to be, I'm gonna call it. The second option is I'm gonna call it, and it's not gonna respond. So I'm gonna pull it with the collar and be like, "Come on, buddy." And when I pull it with the collar, it follows me. It's like, "Oh, okay, cool, cool." Right?
Yeah.
Then there's the third dog, which is like
Most
bark,
severe.
bark, 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 bark. I call it. It says no. I try to pull it away. It leans into the fence, and what do you call it? And it just won't disengage your food. And I said, okay, that dog in that scenario, if it does that, it's gonna need training. It's gonna need training. Like you can't escape it. Like you need to stop it, right? Because I can make the dog stop. It's just not gonna be good to the dog. It's gonna create problems long term, right? And I said, and then there's a special case that's like the fourth option, which is I'm gonna let your dog go. It's gonna get frustrated at the fence for a couple of seconds, and then it's gonna bite the fence. And that's when I know what the dog's thinking, and that's all I need to know. And then we're gonna have a completely different process for that, right? So nonetheless, we set the parameters, and then we bring the dog out, and we assess the dog using that method. And what ends up happening is all of a sudden, the dog does one of those four things, and they're like, "Oh, you called it." I have experience doing this. So when stuff like that happens, people are like, "Hey, that person knows what they're doing," right? And they're leveraging their experience. And so because you can call it out for what it's going to be, people have that like trust in it. Like this guy knows what they're doing. I trust him with my dog, right? So using those personal examples. So like, and they'll come up plenty of times, like over and over and over again. That's a, I don't see that ever being changing because in this it's like in this type of industry it is like, have you done it before, and do you have the experience to do it? So that goes under providing information of our work. One of the things that we talked about yesterday was providing an assessment day.
Yeah, that was a game changer from what you were talking about. Definitely a lot different from previous schools of thought.
Right. So for everyone listening, we do an assessment day. So basically, when we have a dog do a board and training program, or have a consultation for it to come in for an evaluation, kind of the next steps is like just get them in for an assessment day, right? And that assessment day is just like, tell us how the dog's doing. We're gonna check it out, see how it does in our environment. Does it like being here? Does it take food? Does it play? What is his stress thresholds? Like kind of like all the ins and outs, right? And once we have that information, we make a video for the dog, and then we send it over to the owners. And so then the owners get to see their dog be successful at our facility. Then we, go back to them, and they're excited, and they get the dog at checkout. And it's like, oh, you were able to care for my dog for the day, right? And the dog looks good and looks happy. And then they build trust, right? And that's ultimately what this is about. So we see a massive increase in conversions whenever someone does an assessment day altogether. There's a saying that says, when someone pays with their time now, they're willing to pay with their money later. Right? Sense. And so if someone's willing to come to an evaluation and then come again to drop off their dog and then pick up their dog, they've already made some sort of initial investment, right, with people. And so what ends up happening is that they're very likely to then commit to further things, whether it's that program or something else with you guys in the future. Yeah. One of the things I like to get into is, looking at dog training for what it actually is. Like, what are we actually offering, right? What is the service? And what I recommend is everyone kind of lay things out like this too. In our section of what do we really offer when we provide this training to our trainers, it's like we outline each program, and then we say, what does it actually mean to the public, right? So when we talk about PupStart Plus, right, like our PupStart Plus program, what does that mean to the public? And what that means is that daycare that improves, it is basically defined as daycare that improves my dog over time, and it improves my dog the more it attends, right? So the more you bring your dog to PupStart, the better it's going to get. That's what it is, right? So if I'm going to pay for daycare, I might as well just pay for PupStart because it's going to improve my dog's training over time. And we have certified dog trainers running that program. PupStart is freedom from a puppy questions, concerns, annoyance, and exercise. That's actually what that program is to the public. So if you have a puppy, you have a lot of questions, you have a lot of concerns. It is kind of annoying to have a puppy. Like if you have a puppy and it's at 9, it's like, "Bah, bah, 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 bah," or you have, something that the puppy that's a little more driven. And then you also have to do exercise and expose it. And so Pupstart covers all of that, right? So what we're really doing is we're providing freedom from puppy questions, concerns, annoyance, and exercise. That's what that program is, right? That's how internally it all boils down to for people's concerns and alleviating problems and providing the desires that they want for their dog. Board and trains are defined as fast solutions to challenging dog problems with ongoing reliable results. That's a board and train. Yeah. You are taking a dog's life experience. You're spending several weeks doing it, which is short and fast in comparison to months of training or doing one-on-one privates. Is the fast solution for challenging dog problems. So most of the dogs that end up doing boarding trains are, they're challenging dogs, right? Or they have a challenging problem, or they have a challenging skill that needs to be learned. Having a dog fly back to you in a recall into a heel is not something that you can just do overnight. It takes practice, repetition, ongoing. And depending on the dog, it's more challenging than others. And then there's ongoing reliable results, meaning that we're going to guarantee it. We're going to make sure that we can do this for your dog. And your dog, and then basically just makes the results reliable. We'll take it to the finish line for them. And that's what we promise the clients. And so that's what it is. And then for boarding and daycare, we say trustworthy, familiar place to leave my dog with reliable people who know them. Because the only way to board at Found and take your dog at Found is by completing a boarding train program. That's it.
And you don't do a lot of day training, right?
No, we do day training too.
I mean, like not a lot of it's like your main thing.
No, it's not our main thing. No. We do a lot of boarding training. We do a lot of training programs here. I would say 50% of all the dogs here are in training. But we have such a massive training staff, right, that we've grown over the years. Sal, you're making me think of like just scrapping this whole thing. These are like really solid secrets. I mean, just telling people. But I always say that. Clips. I always say to trainers and when I'm kind of like not simplifying what we do, but to some degree giving them the nitty gritty of what we're actually providing to the clients, right? And the benefits to the clients. And then back from the top, Pupstart Plus is daycare that improves my dog over time and it improves the more it attends, right? So Pupstart is freedom from puppy questions, concerns, annoyance, and exercise. Board and train is fast solutions to challenging problems with ongoing reliable results. That's it. Yeah. Board and daycare, trustworthy, familiar place to leave my dog with people that we trust. Yeah, I think I came up with that like 5 a.m. or something like that. I was at the gym and I was like listening to things and I was like, what do all these programs boil down to? And that was that. And it's really important for people to understand that because like what we may see as like big time dog training, luring, classical, science and all that kind of shit. What you ultimately realize is that to people it's much simpler than that, right? And it's like, how does it alleviate their needs? And this is where that comes from.
And we're back from messing with the camera for like a 5th time.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Maybe I should read the instructions.
You haven't read the instructions? It's not an IKEA table, dude. Maybe you should read those.
I know. That's why it's like, I feel like this relates to something that we talked about. No, I guess not. Just do it.
No You're gonna do it. No segue.
Just no segue today. No. But yeah, so long story short, that's kind of where we're at. How we handle all of our puppy evaluations and our training evaluations. In terms of like actual training evaluations, I do the same thing, which is like I start all conversations with tell us your dog's story, right? And what I mean by tell us your dog's story, I really mean like where did you get the dog? What is his background? What rescue did you get it from? What did the rescue dog tell you? Like all of the information, specifically how old it is, right? I always ask like, how old is it? Because sometimes when people are coming in, they're like, my dog's 3 years old. I got it from the rescue and I have it home with my kids and everything's going great. And it's like, you have a 3-year-old dog that you don't know. You've had it for a couple of weeks, but you don't know them around your kids. You know what I'm saying? And like, what did they tell you? Where's the background? Et cetera. I'm like super safe. Like I've just seen some horrific things happen with people. So super cautious when it comes to that kind of stuff.
That's something that I've had problems with where I've definitely gotten better with it, but I would do an evaluation and, I would ask them like, hey, like what's going on? And they would tell me like a little bit, oh, dog pulls, dog reacts, dog XYZ, but like it's nothing crazy. And I would kind of just take people's word for it, like, all right, it's your dog, like you know what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And I would go on to like not my pitch, but just like what I had to say, like what
Right.
information I wanted them to know. And then we'd get like 2 or 3 weeks into training and be like, hey, like we're seeing these things with your dog. Like, is this new? And they'd be like, no, like that's been happening for the last 2 years. And I'm like, well, you could have told me. But then again, I also didn't really poke and
Right.
prod and ask the right questions.
I like to poke and prod because they're going to give me a ton of information that I think is just going to be super useful, right? And I always kind of move on to like, what do you want to do with this dog? Like down the line, what is your dog's goal? Like, where do you want to get it to? Like, you just got a rescue dog. You're going to bring it to training. What do you want to do with it? Like, what do you want the goals? Like, most people have a reason why they're coming to training, right? Like, most people don't come to training because they feel like training their dog, although some do, but the vast majority, they have a certain objective, right? And so they start thinking about like, well, what is the objective? And then give you to that. And so when they give you that kind of stuff, they really start, I guess you start showing them that you're paying attention, that's like the thing that you're really interested in what their ultimate goals are, right? Because the worst thing that people, especially in pet care, can do is like, oh, my dog's just going to go into a cookie cutter situation, and I'm going to get whatever I'm going to get, versus like a very personalized experience, right? And most good dog training is a personalized experience altogether. I like to ask the same thing: are you a first-time owner? Not a first-time owner? How's the dog? How old is the dog, and how long have you had him? Because that kind of segues the conversation into like, it's 5 years old and you had it 6 months, so he's 4.5 years of its life lived not with you. That's an issue. You don't know this dog, right?
Yeah.
And then I tell people that like in the 1 week you're gonna see a bit of the dog. In 6 months you're gonna get more of the personality. You don't know the dog until you've owned him for 1 year. You don't know.
That's very
You
true.
just don't know the dog until you've known him for 1 year. Like that's what I tell people. Like that's enough for things to happen and progress where you kind of like know what's going to happen, right? Or know the process there, and can see different facets of their personality. I like to ask about lifestyle. Like, tell me the lifestyle of your dog and their routine. What is your routine when you wake up in the morning? What time do you wake up? What do you do? Like, and then what is your dog doing during those times? I like to know the lifestyle because it also lets me. It raises red flags for me if they have like a super active dog and they're like, oh, you know what? Like, I'm not really active. I don't really like doing that kind of stuff, and you're like, oh, this can be a problem. And so most of the time to me, it's not, let's rehome your dog, or maybe this dog's not for you. I don't think I've ever said that.
To rehome.
I've never said maybe this dog's not for you. I'm on like a.
I've recommended, unfortunately, BE before, but I've never had to be like, rehome this dog.
Yeah, no, I think I'm a toxic. I'm a toxic. What do you call it? A toxic. A person that is very positive. Toxic positivity guy.
But like it's not necessarily that, because like if you rehome a dog, like you're kind of just pushing those problems off onto somebody else.
Yeah, somebody else's problem, right? I try to, whenever I have dogs like that or situations like that where maybe the dog and the owner are not a great fit, what I try to do is I think about the skills the dog needs to learn, and then I think about the complementary skills that the person needs to learn,
and meet in the middle,
right? So it's like, hey, I have a dog that's very active, like cattle dog, that needs physical fulfillment. It's like, well, your dog needs e-collar, off leash, and fetch, right? And you're gonna learn how to work the e-collar, walk the dog, and do fetch with the dog, right? And you're gonna do that twice a week and plays with the dog, and most of the time people find real true fulfillment, right? I just did that with a personal protection dog we just placed recently, and one of my biggest thing for Malinois in the city is like, let's go to the park and throw the ball. Oh, cool! You have 2 Malinois now. Let's go to the park and
throw 2 balls.
Throw a ball while you tell one of your Malinois to down and stay.
Yeah.
And now the other one's Brittany calls it 2-dog fetch. She's I'll give her all the credit. She's the one that does that. I'm not one to push my dogs like that unless it's like for a client.
Yeah.
But all her dogs are like 5-dog fetch, free dog, get over here. And they play for a little bit and then they just rotate dogs, etc.
Yeah.
But that's a skill that, I focus on what the skills that people need to learn. And the skills dogs need to learn in order to meet in the middle and have a successful relationship. Like that's what I focus on. Because without that, it doesn't matter if all the dogs fell in love with all the skills or how amazing a dog trainer you are. You're not going to own that dog, right? You're not going to own that dog, and the dog trainer's not going to own that dog. So it's always going to be an issue. I asked, how do you exercise your dog and do you crate them? How often do you socialize the dog with other dogs and or people? I like to know that because I just want to know whether the dog's capable of doing those things, right? And so as I'm
Mhm.
assessing the dog, I also want to make sure that I'm very transparent with the owners as what I'm learning about the dog. I always ask, what are the primary concerns, and then I also want to know what they've already done. Right? Like
Mhm.
a big part of like what they've already done for me, it's like to some degree, it's like what have you already
Have you
met?
tried potty training? Have you done, positive
Yeah,
reinforcement videos off YouTube, whatever?
yeah. Like the real question is like, what have you already messed up?
Yeah, pretty
Like
much.
that's the big one. That's the big one. It's like, what have you already messed up? Like,
Yeah.
I have a reactive dog, and so and I asked them, please be absolutely honest with me, please,
Hmm.
because I'm gonna find out. Like I'm forensic dog training, right? Like
Yep.
I know how this dog was trained. Like I know what people have already done.
Hmm.
So it's like, okay, cool. Some people would say, on the more dire situations, say, I got this dog who was being reactive. I went to PetSmart and I got a prong collar or Petco because I'm not sure
Pet corrector or jar of
you know,
compressed air.
or something like that. I got a prong collar, and then I took him outside, and I just like wailed on him, and he stopped, and then tried to come up the leash, and now he's worse, and so that's where I'm at. And I'm like, thank God, thank you for telling me that, because
Hmm.
a lot of people won't do that. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people are just like, here's my dog, it is what it is, and and they're like,
Yeah, I just.
see you later, alligator. I also asked them what other trainers they've been to, and what other training methods they've approached, right?
Mhm.
Or they've used, what training approaches they've participated in. Some people have said, I've tried to balance before and they screwed it up, or I've done positive only and it just doesn't work. I mean, maybe because it's a microcosm of things, right? We only see dogs that need training and dogs that have been failed to be trained by other people, right? So
Mhm.
someone that's done positive only is only going to come in and say positive only hasn't worked, right? Or this other trainer didn't work, or this doesn't work.
No,
People,
sorry.
yep.
Do you ever get concerned? Because, like, we've certainly like had some people that we've done evaluations with, and they're like, "You are the eighth dog trainer that we have worked with, not gone to do an evaluation with. Like, we've done 8 other programs with other people, and still something's or whatever. Like, we just didn't like the way this one trained. Like, does that ever send up a little red flag in your head? Like, this might be a difficult route to go with people, or a difficult client potentially.
Mm, that's a good one. That's a good one. It hasn't in the past to anything. It's made me more curious. But
Yeah.
now I would just like an explanation from the owner or the client. Be like, okay, so like why? Like why do you think? Right?
Yeah,
Like I
that's
just
what I
want to
do.
know. Like just say me. Like I just want to know why. Did you not like them? Did you do whatever? I've had clients with all sorts of like challenging situations or that create all sorts of challenging situations, right? And I've had people fly in from Hawaii and as far as like San Francisco, and they're like, I want to bring the dog to you. And I'm like, why would anyone fly their dog across the United States to bring it to me? And then you realize that this person is also a very extreme person, right? And
Hmm.
they want what they want. And they want to take their dog where they want, and they want the training that they want, and they're willing to pay whatever is necessary, but they want what they want, and then that's a whole different thing. You know what I'm saying? And
Hmm.
so, similar cases, I always like to know, like, why? What did you get from other dog trainers? Because there couldn't be possibly that bad of dog trainers, right? There's
Yeah,
just
right.
something that you're missing or something that, I mean, here in Chicago, we do get a lot of that stuff, but because we also like spend a lot of time in sports and we have a behavior background and rescue background. So a lot of the times we can look at the overall assembly of behaviors and training that people have done and then also say, well, they just didn't do this and this is the fix, right? And that's what I mean, Bart and Michael would call master coach, right?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
go to a master coach, they're gonna look at your little fine detail stuff and be like, you need to do this because this seems no problem. Kind of like what we've done with business, right?
yeah, exactly.
Here the last couple of days. Um, so and then same thing I asked, like, what are you familiar with? What programs you're interested in? And then how soon they're willing to start. Most of the time people are just asking like how is it that I can afford this thing, right? Because I want to really want to work with you.
Hmm.
And then most we'll get into like payment plans and we'll get into like payment options or ways to do it. We want to make it work for clients. We're not trying to be
Yeah.
like, sorry, you can't work with us or anything like that. We try to be very flexible and very fair to clients. We want to respect their time, energy, also their investment. Like it's a big deal. Like it's a lot of money, right? When people are investing significant amounts of cash into training their pets, for me, it's about respecting that, right? And making sure that we can deliver on the things that they're asking us to deliver on. That's a big part of all of this. But yeah, so that covers a big portion of that. And I think we're like an hour and a half, almost like 2 hours in.
Yeah.
But maybe tomorrow morning we can go over some terminology and like mindset about stuff, because it really comes down to about like sales process and the follow-ups and all that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? And that's going to be a part 2 to this podcast episode. Guys, today we are out of time. But I hope this information was useful to you guys. Sal, do you have any other questions or anything like that?
No, we've covered a lot.
Yeah, we covered a lot. I mean, this is typically a multi-day thing. I was actually thinking of doing a couple of like immersive programs like this for like business owners or dog trainers or people that really want to get ahead in this and just share my experiences. I'm not going to make promises. I can just promise that I can teach really well what we do and what I've done. I cannot make promises of like how well they can apply. So a lot of the times for me, it's not selling a system, it's teaching general understanding. Like
it's passing knowledge.
It's passing knowledge. It's like what we were saying, like define and build your own programs. Over time, that's ultimately what you're going to need to do. And I think that is also furthers innovation. You know what I'm saying? Like it promotes knowledge building. It pushes the industry forward for people to keep innovating and doing that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, so guys, thanks for listening, and I really appreciate you spending the time, and hopefully our conversation was helpful. Sal, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You've been very fun to talk to, and so it's not going to be the first time that we're hanging out and doing stuff like this. I'm sure we're going to see you plenty of times. And guys, if you're in New Jersey, where's your place going to be?
So it's going to be in Cinnaminson, New Jersey.
Okay.
South Jersey.
South Jersey. And when are you planning on opening? When do you plan on doing like a grand opening?
So we're going to be doing a soft opening April 1st, and then our grand opening is going to be late July, early August. We're getting a date together now.
Cool. Well, keep us posted on that. We'll make sure to let everybody know, guys. And if you guys want to meet Sal, support his business, and also go hang out and check out his place, because I know he's going to do an amazing job at it. You can follow him on Instagram. What is your socials?
It is complete.canine, which is K9.services. And it's the same thing on Facebook and TikTok.
All right. Sounds good, man. Well, thanks so much for being here. And guys, everyone,